So I'd like to welcome back to the stage two of our previous keynote speakers, Tom Gruber, the co-founder, head of design and CTO of Siri and the founder of Humanistic.AI. Dr. Ayesha Khanna, entrepreneur, AI advisor and founder and CEO of Addo. And then joining Tom and Ayesha on the panel, we have Matt Bain, who is an executive with a track record of driving growth and engagement through AI, and is the marketing and data director at Spark. Nikhil, Ravishankar, an experienced tech innovation, business transformation and strategy leader, and he is the Chief Digital Officer at Aotearoa New Zealand. And last but not least, Steve James, who is a strategic technology thinker and leader, and the General Manager of Technology and Digital at Woolworths, New Zealand. So please give everyone on our panel a very warm welcome. Kia ora koutou. Welcome, everybody. We have a slightly difficult task to look into the future when we're talking about a technology that we've all acknowledged is moving at warp speed. I think that's the exact term you used, Tom. And so it's a little difficult, and you're all from different industries, so we'll get through as much as we can in the time we have allowed. Perhaps as a place to start, I thought I might ask Steve from Woolworths how you are currently harnessing AI in the supermarket sector, and to what end?
Yeah. I guess one of the things that is important to remember is we are still a grocer, so our job is to put food on the table of people that need it. So there's substantial disruption that can happen in our industry. We are a large, complex organisation. So the way that we've approached it is we've gone pretty wide in our organisation to allow people from, not just from the tech team or the data team, to input ideas and ideate. We've got a lot of ideas. I think current things that we're running in store, so a lot of our replenishment automation happens so that the right thing is in the right place at the right time when you need it. Not very exciting, I guess, but it means that you get the food that you need. One of the cool things we have at our checkouts is something called Scan Assist, where it's reviewing behaviour of people at self-checkout. It can understand what is good behaviour and what is poor behaviour. Maybe I'm taking a product and putting it into my pocket, or taking a product and taking it around the scans. So what it does is it analyses that behaviour and then says, it pops up a little thing on screen and says, there may have been a little bit of a problem with the way you had that transaction. What that's enabling us to do is our team to have conversations with people that are less combative, and it helps us have, I think, better interactions with our customers. But it's pretty exciting for us.
So does that improve or exacerbate the unexpected item in the bagging area problem?
We've found it actually reduces it. So we don't have the weights on the scales anymore, so you don't have to think that doesn't weigh quite the same thing. And generally, most of your customers are trying to do the right thing, so you'll see it'll be a lot more smoother now.
Yeah. And I guess are more and more people just going through and scanning themselves, or do people still want to talk to someone at the checkout and get them to do that job for them?
You've got a range of people. My sister, for example, believes she pays to have her groceries packed for her and refuses to go to a supermarket that won't do that. However, a lot of people, they're short on time. They want to get in and out, and a lot more people are going through those self-checkouts. It's not about reducing staff members, it's about easing the flow through transactions, so it's a lot more frictionless for customers as they go through.
Nikhil, what exciting, different, disruptive ways is Air New Zealand using AI?
Firstly, thanks for having me on this panel. There are so many weird and wonderful use cases that come out of, they've just spawned out of all of the work we're all doing in AI, and some of them are predictable and some are weird and wonderful. For example, one of the weirder ones is all our cabin crew now take pictures of trays after a meal service. And the reason we're doing that is because we've got a model in the background trying to work out what our most popular dishes are and what dishes we serve that don't get eaten as much, which allows us to obviously prevent food wastage, which is a big deal. And one of the stats that came out through that process is apparently 72% of us don't like the blue cheese we serve, and so it gets wasted. Now, I know that's a religious debate, and the 28% who do love it. So it's not about taking it away, but making sure that we're loading the right amount on board, for example.
My issue has always been the cracker to cheese ratio, so if you could look into that.
So, cost of living crisis.
Okay, so is that a giant leap forward to take a photo of the food trays? Could they not just be simply feeding back, hey, no one's eating the butter chicken or whatever the dish is?
Look, we do 17 million passenger journeys, so it's hard to get all of that information back to base in a timely way for us to do something about it. So from that perspective, I mean, food wastage is tens of millions of dollars for us, so it's material. But also there are use cases where there's even more significant value. You know, for us, obviously, we want to lead on sustainability, and if you're an airline, it's tough. It's one of the wickeder problems to solve. And even a small percentage of fuel optimization, for example, makes a huge difference for us. So we have AI now helping us do what we call dynamic flight planning. So normally, and you know, the most contemporary way of flight planning still is to work out where you're going to fly to, how you're going to get to your destination before you take off. So these flight plans are set in stone, and the pilots have some leeway on the altitude, the y-axis that they fly on. But now we can use AI to generate dynamic flight plans to avoid turbulence, much better to take advantage of tailwinds, to fly the right altitudes, but also on the horizontal plane, which can drive significant fuel efficiency, up to 2%, 2 to 3%. That's a big deal.
So how much actual flying is the pilot doing in the age of AI?
Well, the AI is supporting the pilot. You know, there's many things that support the pilot, but our pilots are some of the best in the world. They do a lot of flying.
So we're not going to see a pilot as simply a passenger like in an autonomous vehicle anytime soon. They're still very much at the controls.
Yeah, there's a lot of work going on. I mean, the flight deck is pretty sophisticated to begin with. I mean, we've had automation in there for a while. We are doing a fair amount of work, and there's a lot of work going on in the aviation space around pilotless aircraft. Whisk is a good example of that. You know, it's now a Boeing invested organization that tests their planes down in Wanaka, around that area. I think that sometimes it feels to me that AI-driven flight, autonomous flight, probably is the slightly easiest problem to solve in normal circumstances than an autonomous car, because there's, you know, you're in a different environment, but obviously you're also planning for emergencies and how you deal with that. So I'm not sure I'm going to see, at least in my time at the airline,
we're not talking 2030 then.
No, I don't think so. No.
No. Tom, your presentation this morning, you talked about some tech that has been used to assist those who are non-verbal to be able to communicate. And I guess we've talked a lot about gender and ethnicity when it comes to equality and inclusion with AI. But how do you see it being used in the future to include people of different abilities? The tech, presumably, can really enhance lives.
No, exactly. And that's one of the big opportunities for human augmentation, is to level up the differences we have in our modalities. Some of us are blind, some of us are not able to with our hands, and so on. A lot of people have invisible cognitive disabilities that keep them disenfranchised from the technology. And so that's a good thing. Now the AI is smart enough to bring the interface to the human rather than the other way around. So that's definitely happening. And the companies, you know, like a Google or an Apple, they're committed to universal access, and so they will invest in making that happen. But it could happen routinely in, you know, things like say you walk into the Woolworths and the door is smart, right? It knows who's walking or rolling through the door and can do the right thing, right? Or it knows if that person is struggling with the bag at the counter, maybe, you know, wire the kid in the back who helps people with their bags into the cars in the lot. But do it automatically and subtly, so it's not an embarrassing thing for the person. Those are the kind of things that technology can do. They just have to be designed for the human experience first, right?
Yeah, so there's lots of ways that technology can help improve the lives of, you know, elderly or disabled members of the community. But I think particularly with the elders in the community, they've not grown up with tech the way that Gen Z has. And things are moving so fast. We're also on the verge of having a real bulge in the over 65s, the elder population. How do we continue to include them in this fast-paced digital future?
Yeah, well, Ayesha was talking about those places that you design the place as the home for aging in place, right? And then you equip it with the tech. That's the order to do it in, right? And you can. It's mostly design first and then implement with tech. But that's how you can do it. You can include folks who aren't digitally born digital. Is the same like folks have other kinds of impairment. Like, for instance, if I was in the hospital for 2 weeks and on my back or something temporarily for some reason, I would be the equivalent of a paraplegic. Okay, so they should be able to design. Or if I'm in the car, by the way, if you're driving a car, you are effectively paraplegic with respect to operating your phone. You shouldn't be touching your phone. You have cognitive load, so you're effectively disabled cognitively. You shouldn't be paying attention to the screen at the same time because you can't actually manage the road in that. So everyone's impaired or limited in some way, either temporarily or permanently. And so a design philosophy that says we will level up all those irregularities in ability so that everyone has access to all the technology, it's doable. And it's especially doable now because the technology can understand the human much better than it could before.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
So just a couple of examples from me. So on both ends of the spectrum, I've got a 9-year-old, and she interacts with ChatGPT at night to create stories for herself, right? She says, I want a story about my dad, he's a unicorn, I'm a tree, and we want to learn about love, okay? And it comes back with the story, right? So she's growing up with that, and I didn't have to teach her how to do that other than talk to this. My dad, who's 85, he's in a home, he's sometimes pretty lonely, showing him that he doesn't have to, with his shaky hands on a little screen, type into that. He can just interact as if he would with me, has been quite life-changing for him. And that's early days. And I think that, companionship, I know that may be a little creepy for some people, but I think for your children or for, elderly people, there's real opportunities in there as well.
So your 85-year-old dad is interacting with ChatGPT?
Absolutely.
So using his voice. He's
Absolutely.
talking to it, and it's
Absolutely.
talking back to him.
Absolutely.
And he enjoys that experience?
He loves it. He loves it. I mean,
That's so interesting.
It's a bit novel for him at the moment, but also he is getting quite good information and conversation from it as well.
I guess what he's got is you, who's very tech capable, to help him through it. Ayesha, how else can we bring along all communities in this future that we're imagining?
Well, I think that it's really important to make sure that, just as Tom was saying, that you're designing it with the right intentionality for inclusion and diversity. Google, for instance, has this new experimental project called Relate. And it's a voice chatbot, and it can understand people who have cleft palates, for example, or are suffering from any impairment that doesn't allow them to speak clearly. And it can translate what they're saying to the person that they're interacting with. And I think that's wonderful. I encourage you to go to that website and think about it. And I also love this idea of companionship. There are so many millions of people who have AI boyfriends and girlfriends, not just companions. Maybe some people in the audience do as well. And it's become very common. There was a whole article in the Washington Post about this woman talking from China about how she had an online boyfriend and she preferred her online boyfriend to her real boyfriend because he was much nicer to her. But it's a bit complicated because we want to make sure that the people who create these companions are governed, because when we fall in love or we have companions, and Sherry Turkle from MIT says that we can't help but develop emotional feelings for them, and so we can also be potentially manipulated by them. And they can make us buy things, take on mortgages, etc. But I'm a firm believer that it can help in companionship if it's a well-governed chatbot. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, not only for the elderly, but also for teenagers who are undergoing mental health crises. The key really is that they must have checks and balances so that they can alert the parents or the children of the elderly or anybody else if they see signs of any mental distress.
Yeah, and I think there have been some well-publicised cases of late, right? Particularly with children engaging with AI companions that haven't ended so well, which I guess brings us maybe to the ethical risks or just the risks of AI. Matt, how do businesses and society in general, how do we combat some of those risks, regulate for some of those risks so that we can move forward with confidence that this technology is going to be used for good and not for the worst case doomsday scenarios?
I think for businesses, you hear a lot about fear. And I think for businesses in New Zealand, fear is a really bad strategy when it comes to the pace at which this is moving. So you've heard from everyone today about how quick it's moving, how it's blowing our minds that it's going faster than the experts expected. And I think it's important to realise that New Zealand's already behind in this area. So the stuff you're hearing today is sometimes surprising because we're not on the cutting edge, but there's no excuse for us not to be. And you can get started relatively safely, right? So we have a Privacy Act. Most of us need to have things like our consumer data in good order. We need to make sure it's protected. We need to not misuse it. That's the bare legal minimum. When you start using AI, you need to get into ethical-based guidelines. So the starting point is, how do we start to build ethical frameworks that mean that as we move into some ambiguous kind of spaces potentially in the future, that we've got guardrails that are beyond the legal requirements, because for those of us that run brands, that's going to be important. You can ruin your brand with this.
Who governs the ethics then if that's beyond the legal guidelines? Who governs the ethics of it if that's over and above the regulatory framework or the legal guidelines? Is that something we just have to figure out as a society?
It's the way
we're comfortable.
It's the way we already run our businesses, right? So we already run our businesses not by just doing the bare minimum legally, because we understand that to have loyal, ongoing customer bases, we need to do more than just the bare minimum in a competitive environment. So I think there's already a lot of regulation around copyright, around how privacy works, around what's legal and not legal to use. So I think the first thing is, for most New Zealand businesses, is make sure that you've got all those basics in place that you should have in place already, and then start with a single use case. And usually you would start with a use case which is both safe, achievable quite quickly, and delivers significant business benefit. Now, there is a huge number of use cases across every organisation, across every sector, and so you don't need to start with these really high. There's a lot of value in really simple, low-risk use cases. So an example might be, one thing we do at Spark is revenue leakage. So are we charging the right customer the right thing, given the contract they've got? AI can scan the contract, understand what a customer should be paying, whether they're paying too much or not enough based on the billing we're actually doing. There's a big use case which doesn't require the use of sensitive data, third-party data. Now, once you get into, we want to use this to serve our customers, i.e. to predict what a customer might want and serve them an ad or a service on the background of that, then you need another level of sophistication, which is for each use case and each data class, which of these are safe and which are not. So think of it as a big spreadsheet with the reg status, red, amber, green. If I want to sell Matt an iPhone, I know he's an iPhone user and he's usually renews every 3 years, I can probably predict when he's going to do it. That's probably quite safe. And probably Matt would be fine with that. If you're inspecting at a packet level what I'm doing on my phone, that might be legal, but it's probably not something that ethically I would expect you to do or that a business would need to do. So I think as you get more sophisticated, understanding that detail is required. Most New Zealand businesses aren't there yet. And so I think what you realise is if you get started on one use case, make sure the data you're using is data you're allowed to use and it's being kept safe. Make sure that the use case isn't fraught with any peril, isn't misleading people. That will give you some muscle memory, some experience, and you'll start to feel your way into this. And then you'll start to build the guardrails around it. And I think so, my advice would be, yes, there's some risk. The risk happens, in my view, I'd like to hear other people's opinion, once you get to some more advanced use cases, but getting started can be really simple and risk-free if you're careful about where you get started, would be my take on it.
We often tend to disclaimer everything away, right, with the terms and conditions, much like Apple does, when you update the software and no one reads it. But technically that's telling us all the ways they're using our data. None of us are just concerned enough about it to say, no, I don't want to do that, therefore I'm not going to use the device, right? So I guess there's a tension there. We want it to be easy and straightforward, but there's also information that we need to know. if we're going to look a little further into the future, Tom, when you were speaking this morning, you talked about the team that developed Siri seeing particular different technologies all reaching a kind of tipping point that allowed that to be the right time to introduce Siri. You know, if they hadn't been at that level of capability, it might not have happened at that point in time. Probably what we all want to know is, what's next? What are the technologies that are reaching that tipping point? How do they come together? How are we all going to get behind the next big thing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the world has figured out one of those big technologies, which is the foundation models of AI, are going to enable a whole lot of things. Now, how they're going to enable, that is, you could build 15 use cases in Spark and 15 in airlines and so on top of what we already have. There's low-hanging fruit, as it were, because they've done this huge amount of fundamental work in how to make a smart system, and then you just add the business logic and things on top of it. So that's a thing where that trend is ready, and you could look out a couple of years and say, yeah, we're going to work out a few. I'm not sure we're going to work out hallucinations, but we're going to have to work around hallucinations and work through a few other things, costs and so on. But there are other technologies too that are slower moving. Like the fact is that more and more of the world actually will be online thanks to the telcos and stuff like you guys. Like the actual number of people who actually have true broadband where they live is going to change some of the dynamics. So I don't know what the situation is for broadband in the rural parts of New Zealand, but every time in history, like we've watched how it happened in Africa and so on, you drop cell phones into a rural economy and it changes everything. I mean, it starts with like, now a guy can call ahead and say, what's the futures market for my commodity in the city, and know when he's going to harvest and sell. But if there's a million things happen when you introduce broadband. So that's another thing to think. There's still a little bit of juice left in the broadband distribution throughout the world. There's a few other things like that. And the trick there is just to see what can you, in your sphere of influence, take advantage of. What do you know that you can do? And the AI is such an obvious thing. It's hard to because it's just like when the web happened. The web allowed almost everyone to do at least one kind of publishing, some kind of a website. You could be one-to-many broadcasting and many-to-many communicating overnight with almost no cost. And so AI has a similar thing. You can do something with it today. And then we'll figure out who the Facebooks and the Amazons are of the world in 10 years or so.
Equally, though, Ayesha, there'll be hype that doesn't come to fruition, and there'll be other ones that we don't see coming. Do you have a view on where we should be looking? Obviously, AI is the next big thing, but it's how it's utilized that everyone's trying to pick how it all comes together.
Yeah, when we work with government agencies or with corporations, exactly as Matt was saying, we kind of go for, first of all, the low-hanging fruit, which are where you can get the data easily, where you can show value. A lot of companies get stuck on prioritizing which use case to do first. They become paralyzed, or they have, as my mother-in-law used to say, analysis paralysis. So basically, go for operational efficiency first, because that's the easiest thing to do. You can increase productivity, you can lower your cost, and then increase your profitability. The second is your customer experience. That's the second thing that people are really asking us to do, because when you're able to personalize or hyper-personalize the customer experience, you actually become more customer-centric as an organization. Everybody claims it. I think Jeff Bezos is one of the few who really means it. But to be obsessed with the customer, you have to give them what they want, when they want it, and answer their questions as quickly as possible, just like the checkout that you were talking about. Everybody wants speed and efficiency. And then the third thing is, when you can truly think out of the box and imagine what you really truly stand for. So for example, for some of our healthcare providers, we have a lot of healthcare providers as our patients, as our clients. They have become known, for example, if you look at Mayo Clinic, they've become known for treating patients really well. But if you look at their mission statement, it's to provide hope and health. Nowhere does it talk about patients. So now they can go back to their original mission and say, how can we prevent having to take care of someone who's bedridden with a stroke? And so they have created an AI that uses all the ECGs of stroke patients over the past decades to predict 10 years ahead of time if you may be vulnerable to having a stroke. And so they can prevent that. And that is the new definition of a hospital, not where you go to be taken care of when you're sick, but that can predict if you'll get sick and prevent you from that. And I think that's really the holy grail, right? Out of the box thinking. So you go back to your why of why you are an organization in the first place.
And if we go back to what I said at the beginning about 2030 being both around the corner and technological light years away, when you spoke to us this morning about Singapore and its kind of tech-first approach, how long did it take to get there? If we're thinking about New Zealand being this tech-first economy by 2030, are we dreaming? Does it take longer than that?
You're not dreaming at all. Singapore is constantly updating its technology plan. It's tech first, but it's very human-centric, as I pointed out. I would say it's human-centric tech smart city. But the good thing about the way Singapore does it is that it doesn't marry itself to a plan. No organization, country, city should do that. It kind of tries different things, as I was pointing out. It tries different designs, and it's very agile. Whatever works best for its citizens, for its economy, it doubles down on that. So they're constantly also testing their own assumptions so that they're not, blindly following a path. And that's the kind of product mindset that we used to find in Silicon Valley, but now I find in all big corporations. And I think that's very healthy, and governments should do it as well.
Steve, what does the supermarket in 2030 look like? I mean, do you even go to the supermarket in 2030, or do the kind of robots pick it off the shelf and the drone drop it to your front door, or what does it look like?
Yeah, look, I think ultimately it's about getting food to people, right? Food on the table when you need it. People, I think, they're moving more to online shopping, but again, it's still probably only about 15% of our business is online shopping. It's less profitable doing it that way because you have people go and pick it for you. So there's some challenges for our business model.
Have you not got the robots in there picking it yet?
There are absolutely robots picking some of the orders, yeah. Very expensive robots.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so look, I think more for me, I think the challenge is not necessarily just about supermarkets, but with some of the things that we've just been talking about, when you can utilize models to maybe take over the decision-making for your business, why do you need the old structures that business have, which are essentially military organizations with a general at the top? Like, to me, that's the real challenge of how do we rethink what our businesses look like. Maybe we don't have fixed structures. We have teams that organically move to the greatest area of need with these multi-skilled teams. I find that really challenging. I think a lot of the roles we currently have in supermarkets, but in any business, can potentially be augmented with better decision making using Gen AI. But what does it mean for how we deliver our work? I think there'll always be iterations on how we get our products to customers. Certainly things like your drone delivery or automated trucks or things that head out there, sure. But again, it's more about how do we change our business models to be more efficient?
That's a really good point, Nikhil. Not only how do we change the business model rather than just like tack on technology, but how does it revolutionize the organization and how it operates?
Yeah, I mean, I got to do a bit of study recently around this topic, and what was really interesting is it all boiled down to two things that would set organizations up well to take advantage of sort of what's going on in this space. And maybe a couple more thoughts I'll share on that too. One was having your data ready, because that's sort of the fuel that fuels AI, and organizations that sort of had done a lot of work to get prepared to sort of free their data to do more thinking around or getting better situational awareness, aid decision making. A unintended positive consequence was the fact that you could take advantage of AI more effectively, and the other was ways of working. AI is not best used functionally. It is a T-shaped robotic employee by design, and so the more we can shift away.
A T-shaped employee? What's that?
Well, it's these LLMs have done a PhD on all data available on the internet, right? They haven't studied a computer science degree or accounting or,
So they're bringing all the information in like this.
Yeah, so they can go deep and wide depending on that. So if you're naturally, as a business, mixing drinks as far as bringing cross-functionality in the way you work, so breaking down that sort of very functional, hierarchical way of working, then research suggests you're a better place to take advantage of it. So yeah, I think it'll fundamentally impact the way we work going forward. Not in sort of the big, profound teleportation and time travel sort of way, but
we're not in the
really,
Jetsons yet.
No, just the day-to-day working. Just a thought around, this point around trends. And I was just reading this recently, so I thought it was of interest. It shocked me, actually. So far, as a technologist, there are 3 trends I track. There's only 3 sort of base ingredients to every dish we cook, right? It's storage, it's compute, and it's connectivity. And as these things are exploding and the cost is trending towards zero, more and more use cases become available. So things that would have been very expensive to solve become manageable, and you can start to solve these things. But for the first time, I think the constraining factor is going to be energy. These big LLM data centers
are hungry.
Today, I think all of them collectively in the US consume the same amount of power as Japan does. And so maybe that's one thing worth keeping an eye on is, can we keep, powering these things, and how far can we go before we need new forms of power generation? So that'll be an interesting trend.
So is there a tension between AI and its future capabilities and climate change to a degree? Because we can't just continue burning fossil fuels and the like to create the power we need to keep these things running.
Yeah, look, I'm an immigrant, so I'm an eternal optimist. I'm hoping AI itself helps us solve that wicked problem. So
technology will have the answer.
I love that point. I think it's so important to find ways to have sustainable AI. And the new trend is like small, modular, nuclear plants. So a lot of the big companies are investing in that. That's a green and sustainable way of powering these huge data centers that are being built with 100,000 NVIDIA chips now. So that's a big trend that we see.
Matt, Nikhil's already said he's an eternal optimist as an immigrant. I'm wondering what makes you excited and optimistic about the future of AI?
I think for New Zealand, what's cool is that being remote and small isn't a handicap like it is with other things, right? And so in some ways it might help us because we can move quickly if we decide to go because we're small and have less legacy than a lot of larger countries. I think also we're a country of small businesses. Like, can't imagine something like 95% or something of the businesses in this country are small, medium-sized enterprises. And for the last few years, this kind of technology has been prohibitively expensive for a business of that scale to actually get hold of and use. And so I think for New Zealand, it's a really interesting time to go. The only way we're going to grow GDP is actually either be more productive or get more people in the country. At the moment, net immigration is around zero. So this is a big opportunity to go, how do we get up in the morning tomorrow? And we saw a presentation earlier that you're a smarter, faster human with AI than without it. And AI is available to everyone in this room right now. And it's growing exponentially, right? So we are at the start line with all the rest of the world. And I think that's, for me, the most exciting thing. This is a real opportunity for us as a country to decide we're going to embrace this because it creates a better future.
So that perennial problem that politicians have been talking about for what feels like generations, productivity, do you think AI is going to be the step change that actually unlocks improving it in New Zealand?
Either it's going to put us further behind or allow us to get ahead. And I don't.
Which one do you think it's going to be?
It's up to us in the room. The government isn't going to solve this for us, is my view, my personal view. But I think it's, from what you've seen today with what's possible, the fact that we can all get engaged and involved with it right now, I think it's a great potential opportunity for our economy and our businesses if we decide that we want to really, really lean into this and work together on it. So that would be my hope for New Zealand and what the potential is.
you know, just on your question about 2030, and I was terrified that you might ask me that, and I was going, holy crap, this is moving so quickly. How do you put anything sensible out there on that? And the thought that went through my mind was, I think everything will change, and nothing will change all at the same time, right? And for New Zealand, I think the things that make this place special, at least, you know, from my perspective, we're generally still very egalitarian as a society. We still largely teach our kids to enjoy just learning. You know, we have low corruption. I think these things are worth protecting because no one, I think, really understands where this is going to go. And I don't know if this is a buzzword. I'm relatively confident that this is real and it's going to profoundly impact the way we live and work and interact and so on. But I think if we can just continue to double down on what makes New Zealand New Zealand, we might find all these weird and wonderful opportunities to participate in sort of the global market. So that's partly why, you know, I remain optimistic.
Yeah. Steve, do you remain optimistic about the future of AI? I mean, I think the story you told about your father made me think there's actually a lot of hope.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I read a lot of speculative fiction, science fiction, but I love reading stuff that's sort of based in someone who's taken an idea that exists today but has expanded it to just maybe this could happen. What would need to be true?
A lot of those are dystopian, though. So, I mean, are there some positive versions too?
Yeah, absolutely, there are. But you know, I see application for my daughter. You know, like she's 9, and by 2030 she's late teens. I think there is huge opportunity to take some of the things we're seeing that are exploding now and upending the education system, for example. You know, we still have kids sitting in a classroom with 30 kids and a teacher at the front speaking to them, and there's just no need for that. And we know, science tells us that is not how kids learn best. So for me, I'm optimistic if there are people who are bold enough to challenge what we're doing today and go, actually, that's just not working for our children, for the people in our society, and going, let me take one of these tools and try and solve a problem creatively. And I do believe that we're going to see things that we just haven't even imagined yet.
So what do you think? No teacher at the front of the classroom, just like digital tutors or something?
Maybe. Why not, though? Kids learn best through play. They don't learn best through someone teaching them from the front. So why not? And it's people who are bold to ask those questions that are really going to help us accelerate, you know, changing our society for a better way.
Interesting. I know, Tom, you talked a lot about education this morning, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, just if you think, that's only 5 years away, right? That's a pretty short time period. But if you think about what I think about what New Zealand has, it's sort of kind of what Singapore has, enlightened technocratic leadership. And they're actively governing, actually creating, consciously, deliberately creating the governments, right? Very few countries, U.S. is just shooting itself in the head, has no idea what it's doing anymore.
Let's not get into U.S. politics.
But then, exactly. But in this world of like, what's your secret sauce? What's your advantage? It could be that one of the advantages is the cultural creativity. So let's say we want to look at the single old man who's he's looking at interacting with the thing. Either that's a problem or a solution. It could be addiction. It could be manipulation by an attention economy, or it could be mental health care, disease management, and all these other positive things that are also done in the same modality. So the difference is the cultural norm, the society that person lives in. Is he going to be perpetually lonely and sucking heads down into an addiction cycle, or is he going to be supported by the people around him to use that to elevate himself and to manage his hypertension or whatever else? And I think that's one of the advantages of being a small country with enlightened leadership, a real democracy, freedom, like you say, low corruption, everything, all the things you need to be able to say, let's make this place better for us. And I'm really psyched to see that possibility.
Well, I think it's wonderful to end on an optimistic note, right? Because for all of our hand-wringing, there is so much potential here, right? We just have to manage it well. I'd love to talk to you longer, but I realise we're standing between these fine people and a drink. So please put your hands together for our wonderful panel.